Welcome back. Today we're going to do a copy of a beautiful little illustration by John Sloan of boys looking at the sky from a rooftop. Yeah. And we are going to start with just a sense of, we want to compose this sort of the way he did. So for a change, we're going to sort of block in where this drawing fits on the page. So I'm doing a light rectangle, which that's not usually how we start. We're usually doing studies, but today we're going to try to copy this little design. We're going to start with the rooftop. This line is about 2/3 of the way up the edge of the frame. It angles downward for a short distance, and then it angles towards a point near the opposite corner. So that's the main design element here. It fades as it gets near this corner. From slightly above this point, it angles up at about 45 degrees, this other rooftop. And this rooftop goes to about 1/5 or 1/6 of the way of the overall width. That's something you've heard me talk about before. It's fractional thinking. You really want to get used to talking to yourself in terms of the fractions that you're seeing. There's a little vertical. There's another vertical here about 1/3 of the way up this diagonal. And there's this bridge in the distance, which is going horizontally from just above this roof and just below the corner. So that's the scene. We're not going to do any shading yet because shading these aren't really volumes, and it's not going to really give our brains much information about the forms. So we're just going to leave that structure. Now we're going to try to think about the main volumes of these figures. So there's the main volume of this guy's head, rib cage, and pelvis. And then this one, head. Sorry, I'm drawing with my mouse here. I should have my tablet set up, but I don't right now, so. So as we relate these figures, the easiest way to start is by relating these main volumes. So we might think about the fact that, let's start with this guy's head. It's just below the level of the bridge, and it's juts out past the roof line, right? Sort of like that. Now, how do I scale that? I'm doing it by eye. If you wanted to use some fractional thinking, you could say, you could count heads. You see what I'm doing? This is like 1, 2, 3, 4. So this distance here to here should be about a quarter of this overall distance to the edge of the frame. So if you want to check your work and make sure you didn't make the head way too big or too small, you could count that. You could count heads like that. Before I make the other volumes, it would be helpful to know kind of where the pelvis ends, which is here. So I could say that that is about halfway between the little house and the peak of the roof. I hope this is making sense. These are the kinds of things that I say to myself naturally when I draw, but I'm aware that most of my students do not, so I'm trying to articulate what usually goes unsaid. So find the center here, and that should be about where this guy's pelvis ends. The pelvis is fully within the roof line. And then the rib cage is between the head and the pelvis, like that. And I'm not going to worry about legs yet. Having drawn these major masses of this figure, it's going to be pretty easy to block in the masses of the other figure. You'll notice this guy's head is just a little bit off to the left of the first guy's, and it comes right under it's just a little ways below his rib cage. And his rib cage goes down about as far as the middle of the first guy's pelvis, and it's almost horizontal. Sort of like this. The scale of this figure is a little bigger than that one because he's a little closer to us. And there's his pelvis. Okay. We should be looking for the trochanters near the middle of the pelvis, and it's hard to measure because his legs are scrunched up. If that leg was extended, that trochanter would be the middle of the figure, but we're gonna need a little less room because of the bend in the legs. So let's start just with stick figure legs. This leg goes up over the roof line, and then the heel just touches the roof line, and then the toe extends out towards this corner. And this leg is almost vertical with the foot. If we imagine where he's laying on the roof, his foot is sort of extends there. And we could check our work by creating between these two toes, this angle is about 20 degrees from vertical, so that's going to be helpful getting the relationship correct between the toes. And this guy's legs are all scrunched up, but we can see that this toe extends out a little less than the first guy's toe, so we can mark where his toe needs to reach and then just sort of block the leg in. Like that. And there's a few other details. This guy's like sort of laying his head more or less on his hat. So we're gonna throw that in. Oh, they both have their heads on their hats essentially. Unless their hats are just kind of sitting there. So if you're struggling to keep up, don't worry about what I'm doing right now. I'm just adding a little bit of tone back here. It's not going to really look like we've achieved anything yet. This is all just sort of measuring and placement, but it's important to do these steps prior to digging into details and making sure we have room in the design to put the both figures. And I think I'm gonna pause for a minute to check your work, make sure everyone's in good shape. Okay, we're gonna get into some detail now. So, this is not going to be a perfect copy, okay? So don't stress. But you should have a sense of the size of this guy's head. I'm flattening the face a little to give myself a little line of the face. We don't see his jaw because his jawline because it's covered with his arm. So let's go ahead and put that arm in first. And we're just committing now. We're gonna make our lines a little darker, and we're not gonna stop and erase anything. We're just going for it, okay? So this is actually a really challenging pose, the way his arms kind of thrown back behind his head. This is a great example of how artists, and this is really comes through the practice of cast drawing, where you practice drawing the heads of sculptures. Artists think of hair in terms of volumes. See, he's not drawing hairs, he's drawing these large clumps of hair. He's simplifying it in exactly the same way a sculptor would have to, right? Because there's not a sculptor in the world that that individually creates sculptures of individual hairs and then puts them all together. You have to simplify the head. Okay, so we're going to take one measurement. I don't even need to say this, but we should be looking for the eye in the middle of the skull. So notice that the hair has some volume. So we're gonna start here. We're ending here. The eye has to go there in the middle. And we're gonna start with the eye. We're just gonna pop it just a little ways back behind the bridge of the nose, like that. eyebrow above it. Part of the youthful quality of these figures is how shallow the bridge of the nose is and how they do not look like fully mature men, right? Because of the small nose and small chin. So there's that little nose. Something like that. Little hint of a nostril here, but not much detail to be found. There's a very subtle kind of flattening of this figure, like I think he's exaggerated a few things just to really show that these guys are like pressed against the roof. And I'm going to start doing some of this hatching. I'm just following his direction. Children are so hungry for experience in a way that adults are not. And these guys have obviously climbed up onto the roof in order to have an experience. And it's obviously a pretty sublime experience. And that's really what's in short supply today, I feel, is experience of the sublime, because we can so easily be stimulated by things we watch on screens. But I remember being that age, you know, they looked to be maybe 15 or 16, and I was at boarding school, and I would sometimes sneak out of the dorm in the middle of the night, and the school had these giant lawns between some of the old dormitory buildings, and I mean really big, like some of them were bigger than a football field, and I'd walk into the middle of one of those lawns, like I would walk to the very middle and then lay on my back in the middle of the night and look at the sky just for the experience of seeing the stars like this. And I would choose a place where, from my vantage point, lying in the middle of this huge lawn, I couldn't see anything in my peripheral vision except sky, more sky. So there would just be sky everywhere I looked. And I remember the feeling was like, I remember thinking to myself, it was like a bug on a window shield, but the window shield is Earth, like moving through space, and I'm like just lying on the leading edge of it, hurtling towards the stars. Okay, the leg. I just pretty much masked out the thigh around that line I drew. And I'm again following Sloan's hatching. I'm pretty sure this is oh, I don't know what this is. I forgot to check. If it's a print, we could confidently say Sloan is, I actually can't tell. The hatching's going all over the place. This feels like right-handed hatching, but if it's a print, then he would have hatched it the other way on the plate because everything reverses. Okay, we're going to mass out this other leg. And we already know where this foot needs to land, so we're going to end the cuff of the pant with enough space to get the heel where it needs to be. And then we're going to mass out this shoe around the gesture we drew. Every once in a while, it's important to compare distal elements of the drawing. So like right now, I'm just checking, is this shoe about scaled appropriately for this head? Feels okay to me. Most beginners make the mistake of only comparing proximal elements of the drawing, elements that are right next to each other, and if you do it that way, you run into problems of compounded errors because you'll make, if you judge the rib cage next to the head, pelvis next to the rib cage, leg next to the pelvis, shoe next to the leg, and you never think to look at how the shoe relates to the head, you might end up with some scale errors that you are blind to. Probably, I spoke earlier about illustrators, how beneficial that practice was for an artist like Sloan. Probably one of the most significant benefits was deadlines. Like the simplifications that we're seeing, like how simply drawn these shoes are, the face, I mean, everything's reduced to just a few marks. And all those simplifications were required by the demands of the profession, which would have been like, we need this by tomorrow morning, so you better find a way to draw it really fast. And that's one problem that I remember as an aspiring fine artist was, you're trying to get a gallery show and you're trying to do painting, drawings and paintings as best you can, and the temptation is just to work on them for way too long, like our friend Dylan, and just overwork them, capture every nuance of a photograph, and you never learn how to simplify things or reduce things to their You never learn how to do more with less. Okay, this guy, we're going to call him done. And please remember, if you're unhappy with your copy today, the fact that you did it is going to prove to you and to me that you saw the whole drawing, and that's really 90% of the value of this kind of exercise. So this is a lost profile. We're just seeing the curve of his face and his hair. And a little line for the neck. And then this hand reaching around, sort of clasping the back of his neck. The hand is not as well drawn as the rest of the drawing, but it tells this story beautifully. The gesture is there. There's a little indication of his ear. Okay, so one element that we did not have in the original blocking in was this shoulder. That's going to help a lot with this gesture. Notice it comes up, it almost touches the jacket here. And there's a lovely way that these two figures sort of interlock, the way this movement here is answered by this movement here. Again, probably not an accident. That's a weird pose. This way this arm sort of awkwardly comes up behind the head. And notice this figure is wearing shorts, which also emphasizes his youth, I think. And this leg's coming out from under this thigh. There's a lovely little series of overlaps here because this thigh is overlapping the leg, but then this foot comes around and overlaps the calf of the other leg. There's a little bit of a pretzel shape going on there. I just sort of visually check to make sure that this foot is slightly bigger than the foot of the more distant figure. didn't really. My block-in seems to have a little error because now I've got this foot coming out a little further than it should, but I'm not going to lose any sleep over that. Okay. To make these figures look attached to the roof that they're laying on, it's going to be really important to do some of this hatching of the cast shadows. I'm just going to change the line of this guy's face just a little. I had him looking, had his head bent a little too far back. And we're going to work right to the end of class today. We have about 5 more minutes. Do a little shading on these hats. And you just, what you want to hope from this drawing, number one, that you finish it, and number two, that you just get a little bit of the vibe of these two guys lying on the roof. When you go to life drawing, usually the classes they have for amateurs don't have as good models. And what happens then when the models aren't as professional is as soon they'll do like a bunch of standing poses that are like 5-minute poses, and then as soon as the monitor says, okay, time for a 10-minute pose or a 20-minute pose, they're just gonna like lie down, and nobody knows to tell them not to. So you end up drawing a lot of reclining figures, and as you may have realized by now, the reclining figure is in a lot of ways a lot more difficult than a standing figure, because with the standing figure we are dealing with like learning how a person carries their weight, and the proportions that we've learned are all a lot more obvious. As soon as someone lies down, it's harder to see the proportion, and there's just a lot of extra challenges with reclining figures. None of this background stuff is on the rubric, so just do it if you have time and are getting bored, but I'm just going to throw it in while you're finishing. Get the sense, the part I'm drawing right now, the light inside these windows. Again, just amazing suggestion without any detail. Really, all these windows have lights on inside them. Yep. Okay, thanks at home for watching. I'm going to end this video now. And we'll see you next time.